So good morning, everybody. Welcome to the EMA Industry Exchange. So VEI, the Virtual Events Institute, was a business that started from some very well-renowned people, both sides of the pond, around a year ago. I mean, pretty quickly once this was sort of starting to happen, Simon. But they've put together, I think, 9 modules are going through different elements of creating and helping people support and how they develop their online events and the elements to look at, the different areas, etc. So Simon's going to take us through another 3 of those. But as I said, it's I've looked at the platform. We've had a number of members now go through it. We've had some really good feedback. It's definitely something that is worth considering, either putting yourself through it or maybe 1 or 2 of your team members, so that you are fully aware of the formal processes of putting together virtual events. It'll fast track your people's learning and their development. And we've been very tough on negotiations and got a good discount for EMA members.
I used to have 5 guitars and sell one of them on eBay.
Oh, it's times tough, Simon. Times tough. We're going to go on, one day you're going to play one of them for us. But no, okay. So Simon, over to you guys.
Thank you, Richard. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for letting me join you on your morning coffee once again. I thought it would be useful. This is now, I think, the 3rd, possibly the 4th time I've been with the group to just to recap what Virtual Events Institute's about and some of our journey. Richard's right. We started the conversations with my business partners here and in the US about this time, actually a bit after this last year when the pandemic first hit. We actually didn't formally incorporate until July, and our progress since July is pretty incredible. We have partnerships with most of the leading trade associations in the various event niches around the world, also with many of the larger media players. We are close, I think, to the first 1,000 people completing their full certification. We have an enterprise deal with Informa, so the biggest exhibition and conference organizer in the world, to put huge numbers of their staff through the course and become certified virtual event professionals. We are now CPD accredited, so any individual one of the modules will count as a CPD credit towards an external course or certification that requires CPD training. And one thing that's interesting to point out is that we originally had 9 courses. We also had an introductory course, and when they're in the middle of developing and slicing and dicing the 11th course. So the variety of content that's available is growing all the time and adapting to the changing needs and the feedback we have. And I guess the final generic thing to say before we start to pull up what the courses are like is that we're currently running at a net promoter score of 85. Which is against event industry benchmarks, pretty incredible. And we're very excited about the fact that we're able to change and develop this course and the content in collaboration with our partners and the people who are part of it. So that's the helicopter view. Let's start to drill down a bit. The first thing that's worth saying is that this is an online training course. It's accessible through an online platform and it's on-demand training. So you or colleagues can start any module whenever you want. So you could start all 10 modules simultaneously, but you cannot jump through an individual module. Within a module, you have to go through in the correct order, and you have to complete the exam at the end of it. So a couple of really important things to point out at this stage. First, you have to pass the exam with 80%. So a couple of times when I've been doing the course and I thought, I've really battled through this one, as if speed was the important thing when you were learning, and I failed the questions. And it's been a very interesting exercise in introspection, self-examination, to go back and work out, because you're not told which questions you got wrong. So to go back and reassess and truly understand and interrogate the learning. The second generic thing that really struck me when I was preparing to talk to you all this morning was that Each course has some self-paced exercises and some downloadable learning materials. And that's an incredibly interesting thing. We're used to that in a normal training exercise, aren't we? Many of you will run training where teams break out, do the self-paced exercise and come back to present. It feels, for someone who's not been in education for 35 years, that was remarkably powerful. To be forced to stop, to download a sheet, to write down what impacted on me, my business and my events, and then think about that in the context of the learning was an incredible, powerful experience. And that, I think, leads me to the final generic point that I would make before I talk about the 3 sessions we're going to talk about today, is that now I'm talking to you now as a presentation, so I hope I'm delivering some animation, some energy, and trying to give us a great, exciting start to the day. That is not the tone of our courses. Our courses are learning, they're educational, they're more moderately paced, they're more thoughtful, and that means at times, particularly when you view a segment in isolation, there's an element of feeling like this is grandma and eggs and being taught to suck them. And actually, one of the things that's, I hate this word, but that's humbling about the experiences, I've been running events for 30 years. So I've launched and sold 5 event businesses. I think I'm pretty good at this. And no doubt I am, in certain ways I am. But when you're forced to be disciplined and go through the rigor of section by section by section, realizing the bits that I'm glib about or that I skip over or would enhance what I delivered enormously if I focused in a different area, was enormously powerful. So one of the great takeaways for me has been to not treat learning in the same way I might want a motivational speaker or an inspirational exchange or an energy exchange or a market exchange to work. What I'm really looking for is that sense of being reminded and polishing and where the gaps are. And I think that's incredibly powerful for all of us, no matter what stage of our career we're at. And we have very senior people from our enterprise clients going on this course, and their feedback will be the same. It's been a great reminder of many of the basics.
Just to jump in there quickly, I think it's important that we all remember that, of course, learning is constantly ongoing, and it's not just the because our industry is perhaps not yet, and I wish it was, more professionalized, i.e. you have to do so many courses, you have to do this, if you're a financial securities person, there are things you have to do on an annual basis to keep up to speed of what's new and what's changing. And I think the world of digitalization of our industry and the future digitalization of what's to come, this is a whole new world. It really is. It's I like yourself, I've been in the events industry for many years, and it's very different. This is TV production, a lot of it, and understanding that. And we had just to quickly talk about, we had a discussion on Tuesday at our leaders forum. One of our members brought to the table all around cybersecurity, and I think very clear. We all think about crisis management, risk management at a live event, and physical security at a live event. But there was certainly, and she highlighted and put her hand up, said that there were a number of gaps that they'd missed. So they went through a cybersecurity process, and that was very interesting. I know some of our big members have got things in place, but a lot of our smaller members don't. And before you sort of also go on, I think it's key to add that your courses, it's an ongoing thing. So once you've done your course, that's not it, you're finished. You will get updates, you will be invited to new things. So it's like, I'm guessing your agreement is for the year. If people pay to do the course.
Yes, but
there's a membership, isn't there?
The top ups that you would have in any kind of professional environment, whether that's law or accountancy or medical stuff, that's not at the same rate. You're then just topping up with 2 or 3 courses a year. We haven't quite got down to a year yet, but that's the intention.
Yeah, but you're kept up to date because you kind of become a member, so you get up to date inputs and everything else. Sorry,
I think, Richard, you make a really interesting point there, and just our exchange. So the first session I'll talk to you about this morning is developing. It's called Developing Strategic Content Design, and there are two speakers on this. So again, another really important point is, I think of the 10 modules, only one has only one speaker. The vast majority have different speakers who represent different backgrounds, different company employments, different geographic perspectives. We have speakers from Hong Kong, Australia, Colombia, UK, USA. So lots of different voices, lots of different geographic and market sector perspectives, which I think is part of what gives us our unique flavour. And our first speaker presenter, our first subject matter expert, sorry, to give them their correct nomenclature, on developing strategic content design is a lady called Stephanie Celesnick. And Stephanie has been an advocate and a passionate voice for the US and international trade show industry for a number of years. Her background's actually in rock music, but she like the rest of us fell into events. And she makes a really interesting point that struck me, and I've tried to articulate as well, which is many of the principles of virtual are identical to the principles of a physical event. But what happens is the intensity of the glare on an individual principle or the focus changes. I've often described this, it's like a graphic equalizer in your stereo. The buttons are the same, but you're turning the dials up on some and turning them down on other. And Stephanie makes a great point really early on in this, where she says, this is an incredible opportunity for change. And so just dump what you were doing in person and start again. Start with that blank sheet of paper, that blank canvas, and think about how you will segment your audiences and deliver appropriate content to them in appropriate ways. And she talks powerfully about the format of the content needing to change to keep people engaged. So that idea that 40-minute keynote that used to be kind of the bedrock of so many traditional events, that has to go. That's just not a format that works in the virtual space. It doesn't deliver against Richard's point, I think, the comparison with TV. She asks you to think about your USPs differently. Again, that's a really powerful moment in a learning environment. We all think about our USPs. I'm sure you could all articulate your business and your event USPs, but when you're forced to stop and do that as part of self-paced exercise, it can be very revelatory. The other speaker in this module is Vanessa Lovett. She's the chief evangelist at Glisser, so I'm sure many of you know Vanessa or heard her speak before. She talks about some really important ideas about short, sharp, and avoiding being boring. About this, which puts it really well. There's less margin for error in the virtual world. That idea that whether it's around security or just the backstage area for speakers, you've got much less margin for error. And using she talks again. I should stress, although Vanessa speaks as someone from a platform, she never name checks the platform. There's no sales or promotional stuff for any of our subject matter experts when they come from a commercial background. She talks about the idea of when you've got a platform, making sure that you use, if the platform has a particular benefit in terms of audience engagement, think about exploiting that technology and that part of the platform in order to drive the engagement. And that struck me. So many of us are struggling with, well, here's what we want to do. How do we find a platform that fits it? Which, of course, the right way of having that objective. But there'll be moments when the platform offers the opportunity to rethink that piece of engagement. She talked as well about using the pre-record with a keynote speaker to produce both the promotional material segment and the post-event segment. So using that opportunity to really squeeze content powerfully. And what we're not doing here, but actually struck me as a speaker at several sessions, which is change the format timings around. So actually, if you used to have a 30-minute keynote and 10-minute Q&A, have a 10-minute keynote and 30-minute Q&A. Do everything you can to empower the audience differently. So it was I was really struck by some of the the ways in which that session, that module on developing strategic content design, forced me to evaluate as I'm a creative person. I thought I could rattle off that content and that format, but that twisting some of those ideas around was very powerful. Oh, and really thing at the end about really good insight from Vanessa about where you have a good idea, but it just won't work. A real diligence around stress testing your ideas and bringing in colleagues to do that, and external views to just stress test those ideas, because your margin for error is so reduced in that session. I was doing these for the review purposes of this session in order. And the next one fell very nicely, which was about monetizing your virtual event. And clearly for those of us who are organizing events that need to be monetized, this is a challenging area. There are three speakers here. Again, Vanessa contributes here, but also Nick Paul from the Virtual Event Company, and Andrew Carney, which personally was the content that struck me. Andrew talks about value-based pricing. And so there's a brief digression for those people who don't understand or haven't heard value-based pricing before. And then some really good charts about how to determine price points and accurate benchmarking, and how to develop a proposition for your virtual event that's tailored to the needs of your customer. Some really interesting insights into the way in which data can and should be monetized, which obviously taps into the security point Richard made earlier, and how to think about selling and presenting those news packages to your customers in a way that's powerful for them. Also, some thoughts about sponsorship.
I'm just about to say, presumably that means both paying to attend, for some people have got that, but more importantly, probably some of the bigger ones, and we have a number of different associations that are member, is that sponsorship angle. So either paying to speak at someone's conference or charging people to be a part of your conference.
Right, exactly. Ava Campbell is a brilliant speaker on this in this module on that, Richard, and she's got loads of great feedback from our delegates. One of the things I should say is that this doesn't happen on every. It's available on every module, but people haven't participated necessarily. But every module has a discussion component in the virtual dashboard, so people can ask questions and interact with the subject matter expert, and indeed with other students to ask questions and provoke ideas. So to your point about delegate revenue, Ava talked really powerfully about, again, this was one of those moments where I thought, I wish I personally was more disciplined about some of these things. So Ava talks about white papers and audience research and focus groups and advisory teams and all those things that we all do regularly in order to engage with our audiences and to find new ways of monetizing our content or monetizing the value we give. And it was really hearing Ava talk about that, and then downloading the worksheet and doing that exercise for my World Sport Photography Awards project. I came up with 3 really good ideas. And because it was learning and not motivational and not kind of state of the industry, that moment of calm, I made myself a cup of tea, I downloaded the worksheet, and I thought, what should we do on World Sport Photography Awards? And the truth is, there was nothing there that I didn't know. I'm not pretending. You guys are serious event professionals. You know what you're doing, and so do I. But having that moment of calm and being asked to think about it in this environment, in my home environment, I stopped. I went back and I came up with. I was writing a presentation about the strategic development of World Sport Photography Awards, and I came up with 3 ideas that we will execute. Just a really powerful moment where, unfortunately, I don't have to pay for this training. I get it because I'm part of the business that created it, but I would have paid for it because I've got more value back already just from that one exercise. And then the final session I'll talk about today, which is one of our unique ones, because it's only got one speaker. And I know it's something that continues to vex so many of us, which is choosing the right technology. So the subject matter here is expert here is Miguel Neves. So many of you will know, but you're all about to know him because Miguel has taken over from Julius, event manager blog. And Miguel's therefore a very rounded, very knowledgeable event tech expert. And this session covers a number of things about, so it's got here's a really good checklist. Although I just went to look at it just when Richard was speaking, it doesn't actually include cybersecurity. So we'll go back and amend that. But it's the checklist of what you want for your event and how you then match that against the technology to empower you. It also talks about building the stack, that kind of idea of the tech stack, and using the right people to do that. And then matching the technology against your staffing needs. I think I mentioned the old security guards when we were talking earlier, but I think that's a really important thing. We're all starting to realize as this revolution continues that we potentially do need lots of people fulfilling some of the roles they used to fulfill, but some new roles have been created. Yeah, then actually Miguel goes on to talk about the criteria, the connectivity criteria, the device and browser compatibility, security, privacy, data capture. He talks about all those things as one of the discrete 10-minute sessions within the module. Again, really powerful to hear someone talk about that in isolation for 10 minutes and then go away and do something else, or then be inspired or intrigued or thought-provoked by that session and then leave it to deal with it and then go back to the learning. That's what's so empowering about on-demand learning. Everyone can do it at their own pace, in their own time, go back, do it again, download the sheet, talk to colleagues. It's I've delighted in running through the experience again in order to share it with you guys.
Simon, so I mean, I think there's definitely a big thing around the choosing the right technology, and what we're finding is that you know, a lot of our members, it's not quite that simple because of security, because of the needs. So there's a big procurement process as part of that, as well as their own internal security IT people who look at, and so that also then creates an issue of what piece of technology is best for this event, because generally what's happening in the big companies are engaging with a piece of technology which then they expect to be able to do all of their events on. And from an event manager point of view, there are frustrations because sometimes they say, oh, well, I need workshops in this area, or I need networking in this area. Not every piece of technology. Hang on. I'm speaking. Every piece of technology doesn't tick every single box, for God's sake.
Right, I was about to say, you didn't used to run all of your events in the same venue.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah,
because one of the services we've developed, which is available to everybody, regardless of whether you're buying the certification or not, we have a tender board. So it's the Virtual Event Institute tender board. Any one of you can go on and place your procurement requirement, and then suppliers come back to you, but they don't have direct contact with you. You're able to see what's in the tender board and select your supplier from that tender board. And I know people are finding that useful, Richard, for specifically that purpose. I need to do something different for this moment, and it needs to look exactly like this. Don't pitch me if it doesn't do this.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that the big companies that are providing are evolving what they do pretty quickly, because they're going to get that feedback from some of their clients and their customers saying, but we needed to do this, we needed to do that. So it's kind of, you start to think about, and I can remember years ago when CVent first started that, or the registration system, it was like, okay, you can get it to do this, but you put the cogs together that you want it to do, and you kind of build it to a certain extent yourself. You can add this, you can add that if you want it.
I think that's right. I'm seeing in some of the groups I'm members of a pushback now against Zoom as the video delivery platform, because it doesn't have a good enough for video quality comparatively, and it's not very good at the backstage area. So people are going to StreamYard and other solutions to manage the video, which has some costs attached to them, but create a better experience for both the speaker and the delegate.
Yeah. Okay. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was this sort of thoughts of you, sort of anything you can share with people about, you know, the strategic development content. So, you know, when you're designing your event, you know, I mean, we had an event the other day, which is something that I'm consulting on, and you know, funny enough, after this call, I've got a call to review it, to do a sort of a critical review. But the learning, and it's like, you know, that time slots now I think are so important that, you know, we used to sort of, it was easy to waffle on a stage, and you know, people could zone in and zone out, but the minute you zone out when you're on a screen, it's kind of, right, I'm going somewhere else, I'm going to walk away, I'm going to leave it. And I think there's sort of, you know, maximum 20-minute slots to me, and that's again my personal attention span.
I think that's right, which is, as I said, Stephanie made this really, Stephanie made a really interesting point about switching your timescales back. So if you used to have short Q&A, long presentations, make the audience feel actively engaged right from the off. And I think Vanessa said something like, you know, your competition now isn't the event down the road or your competitor's event, it's the Lion King. Like, everyone's able to be a click away, and that's become a really powerful part of this. I think that when we see physical events re-emerging, many of the learnings and becoming whatever hybrid is, discussion for another day, but what we'll see is many of our learnings from virtual events being transferred back into the physical environment. I think you'll see shorter keynotes. I think you'll see much more audience engagement. I think you'll see a greater demand on heavily briefed and prepared speakers and managed speakers.
Yeah.
I think we'll see much better speaker management when we return to the physical world. Well, I hope.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how are you seeing that people are still planning a whole day event, or are they planning sort of, you know, 2 hours, hour and a half?
I have colleagues who are now saying it's like the event should be a couple of hours broken up over the day. People can drop in and drop out. I've also got colleagues who are planning 5-day events. I guess both of those illustrate the same principle, though, which is there's no expectation the audience is going to stay for the whole event. So even if you're having a 5-day event, you must conclude that you expect people to drop in and drop out.
Yeah, and you've got to mix that with be able to watch on demand, as well as join live interaction. So it's, yeah. And I think when the hybrid comes back, or, you know, the live element comes back, yeah, the event does want to be longer, because do I want to go to a venue? Do I want to travel to somewhere and it's only 2 hours, or, you know, it's an hour here, 2 hours there. Yeah, so that's going to be another conflict of strategies, isn't it?
Yeah, again, I think one of the points that was made, I think it's Vanessa talked about, it's really interesting because I think it's true for all of us, and to the point you're making, Richard, which is we've always had this conflict in the event industry as a whole, I think, between these big blockbuster generic events and highly targeted niche events, and this kind of quality quantity around audience. And Vanessa and Stephanie both make, from a slightly different perspective, the observation that actually knowing when you want one particular audience, so I just want CEOs at this, or I just want ops directors at this, and when you should mix them up, becomes really powerful when we go back to live, which typically, I think you see fewer broad-based generic events virtually, because I'm not going to go to content that doesn't exactly match my requirements.
Yeah. Yeah, I see Elizabeth put something there about a mix of events, and I think that came to light at a session we had a couple of weeks ago, where our members were talking about reviewing what they've done and preparing to come back to live. And Mark, one of our members, led the conversation about how they were approaching, and you know, in the old world, pre-COVID, they were probably doing about 300 to 300 events a year. During COVID, that had increased to over 500 events. So doing a lot more activities online than they were doing live. Now they're going through this process of transitioning back to hybrid or live. And, you know what, they were just starting to look at, okay, let's take all of our events and now let's try and drop them into buckets. The one bucket was, okay, this has to be a live event, you know, because this is who's coming, this is who we want there, this is the content or whatever, but it, you know, has to be live. These events can stay virtual. All right, so we've done some very successful, they've seen much more people attending. I mean, Mark quoted that they had a big pan-European conference that they do annually, which they expect to get about 400 or 500 people attend. They had 3,000 people attend it for the whole day. So much more reach from that. So they had, okay, what could stay virtual? And then what would have to be hybrid, a hybrid model, and then how are we going to do that? So they're starting to, again, it's a strategy. They're looking at how we start to segment what we've done in the past, because we now have options.
Right, and to Elizabeth's point, and to one of your other members who I was chatting to earlier in this week, that opportunity to reappraise. So the member I was talking to said that they'd wanted to change something about an event for ages, but the internal event stakeholders simply refused to change this component. This was how they'd always done it. This was how it was always going to be done. And they were able, because of the shift to virtual, even if it was only for one time, to completely change the format and the way the keynote was managed. And because they did it successfully, they were hopeful that if that event ever went back to a physical format, they would be able to keep that change because they'd had this opportunity for the blanks.
Well, at least we now have, and we have something to compare it against, don't we?
Right.
I think there has been for many, many years a resistance to either virtual or recording and sharing content online, because people felt that would stop people from coming to the live event. And of course, that's, you know, as a business, that's what you want people to do. So you're there with them, you've got these networking opportunities, etc., etc. But because we had to do this, we really do now have two sides of the coin to look at, or two sides of a triangle to look at. And now the future is, okay, so what does the third side look like, which is the hybrid?
But I think it's really empowering for event professionals and event departments. So I don't know, we didn't talk about the session today, but the speaker management is, if you've historically had an event at which there was a stakeholder who spoke and they were not a great speaker, and you tried subtly to get them to understand that a bit of speaker training or support for them might massively enhance their delivery. In the live event, we all kind of shrugged and just went on to the next thing because there was a captive audience in the room. Now everybody's realizing 4 speakers equals switch off. And so the event departments now, I think, empowered a little to say, no, we're going to manage you like this. We must have the presentation a week in advance. We must do 2 technical rehearsals with you. We must have some media training. I think there's a...
If you don't do this,
yeah, because if you don't, look what happened. It wasn't good. People, you know, we went from 1,000 people watching to 10 people watching.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm a great believer there's a massive opportunity here for the whole thing. And, you know, again, my advice to people is to take that time out to review what you did pre-COVID, to review what you've done COVID, to look at benefits for and against in both elements, and then start to work out what the future strategy of the future world, because, you know, we're all sort of staring into the abyss a little bit, thinking, okay, what is this going to evolve? But we can either wait for it to evolve, or we can take the step forward and start to become the architects of the future of what, you know, what engagement is the word I'm using now, engagement looks like.
That's so true, Richard. I had a moment yesterday where I just realized that it was all very well 2 months ago saying what I thought the future was going to look like, being quite assertive about that view. And then as we get closer to hopefully coming out of lockdown and starting to run brilliant events again, I concluded that I simply had no idea that if I made a prediction and I was right, that's pure luck. There were too many unknowns currently.
Yeah. I mean, you got to do a team building conference or meeting. Yes, people need to physically be there and stuff like that. There's so much stuff which is sort of communication, presentation stuff that can be.
I wonder how many of the your members and the people in the room, one of the things I don't think we're talking about, because we want events to come back, is a resistance from delegates who for all sorts of reasons, whether that's COVID or just they've realised they don't need to go and stay in a hotel for 2 nights to go to an event where they only cared about 2 sessions and so on. And they want to
we have touched on that in discussions with our members, and you're absolutely right. There are people and sort of senior people within the business that spend half their lives away from home, away from their office, traveling here, traveling there, holding, to go to meetings, to go to seminars, to launch sales conference, stuff like that, or even M&As and stuff like that. And that they realizing that I don't need to do this. I don't need to do as much travel. So I can be more, if we use this could be better for me and my well-being, my life. I mean, okay, yes, these guys are paid lots of money to do this. Sometimes there's corporate jets sitting on runway to fly people to these. I know an old friend of mine was, would fly around the world in a week and go to 7 cities, different continents to do town halls. Do you need to be doing that all of the time? That's what I was saying. And another very good friend of mine is a top lawyer in the city, senior partner at a major law firm. And, he was responsible for a big M&A that they did in the US. And, he was spending every other week in New York. And he's realized now that he doesn't need to do that. He can probably go once a month or once every other month to New York for physical meetings, but the rest of the stuff he can conduct from home. He's even said, I don't need to go into my London office as much. I get more done, have my client meetings like this, that, and the other. So yeah, I think there is a massive change happening in how we all work, and what we've got to understand. How the industry's got to understand how they can support us. We've got to look at how we support the business and what the business needs are, what works and what doesn't work. And I'm not saying that there's an absolute shift across and change from A to Z. It's just what that middle ground now looks like, and there's a new dimension to it.
Yeah, I think the only thing we can be sure of is that real events will come, real physical events, in real life events will come back. Virtual events will continue, and there will be this boom of whatever we call hybrid. But there will be new events in both markets, and there will be new formats in both markets. I think we're going to see a halcyon golden age of events because the canvas has been wiped clean.
Yeah, I think there will be quite a sort of push, probably more not until next year. That's what we're sort of talking about here, but then a push to get back to virtual. I think there's going to be a lot of internal rah-rah going on, the bringing together of people, bringing together of teams, making sure that everyone's well-being is good and solid, setting the course of the business now out of COVID and getting everyone, to put their shoulders to the wheel. And
your members are the absolute benchmark in many ways, because the discussions I've had with senior event figures around the world suggest that kind of from a trade show perspective, from a major conference, non-internal conference and an open forum conference, that this doesn't start to flow until Google, Facebook, Amazon, and the tech giants start to permit their staff to travel. Until major corporates say we're traveling and we're going to these events, you simply won't get any trickle-down effect to make events of scale happen. And it feels to me that's probably true. But for events of scale, if you want those big players involved, until they start to commit, you're not going to get that.
No, it will start small. It will start with internal meetings, team meetings. So, sort of 50, 100, 150 people, these sort of smaller events. They'll start locally, so in country. Even in the UK, I can see that, you'll have an event, but you'll have a gathering in perhaps London and Edinburgh. And so instead of bringing those people down for 2 days, they'll have their conference up there for the day. We'll have our conference down here for the day, and we'll all talk to each other as well as part of that virtual merge. And this will start to happen, and then the travel will start to happen. Then the client engagement will start to happen more. But that's going to take sort of 6-9 months to start to pick up that momentum again.
Mm.
But it's exciting times ahead.
I think it's incredibly exciting time.
Yeah. So guys, I'm going to ask it. Is there anybody got any questions? Anybody want to jump in and ask anything? Any thoughts or views they want to share as we wrap up? I'm going to say, Simon, you got anything else you want to?
No, thank you for having me.
To touch on.
If anyone wants to catch up with me, just drop me a note, and Priya and Richard have got the details of the discount for you guys. We'd love to see you becoming certified virtual event professionals.
Okay, I think that's great. Thank you very much indeed. I don't know if we've got, perhaps if we've got some little bullet updates that we can do from you, Simon, if you think about that, sort of share something so we can circulate.
Sure.
That we can circulate to everybody just as an update of what you guys are up to. Because again, you had a small group on the phone today, but there's a much bigger audience out there. And from me, so yeah, we'll go from there.
Okay, thanks everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.